From time to time, I do YouTube community polls where you get to choose a subject of an upcoming video. And in a recent poll, the Aston Martin Lagonda won with 30% of the vote. But a video on Proton cars got 29% of the vote, so it would be a crying shame if I didn't also do that one, especially as you seem to like the video on Daewoo. Yes, it's pronounced Daewoo and not Daewoo. I know, I saw the comments. I remember Proton making a splash in the UK in the late 1980s with a cheap and cheerful Saga, but then it seemed to disappear. Well, there's a lot more to Proton than just that. They bought Lotus and surprisingly were still selling cars in the UK in 2016, although no one probably realised it and certainly no one was buying the cars. Why did Proton try exporting around the world for decades while selling almost no cars? And what are they doing now? This isn't the Proton story, this is the Proton saga. Like many emerging economies in the second half of the 20th century, Malaysia saw economic growth by becoming an industrialised nation, and that meant having its own car industry. In 1979, the National Car Project was launched by the Malaysian government, and that led to the formation of Proton in 1983, Proton standing for Perusahaan Automobile Nasional, or the National Automobile Company. But like other developing nations, they knew building their own car from scratch would likely result in lots of wasted money and a half-decent vehicle. Much better than to partner with another car company and learn from them. They agreed a deal with Mitsubishi to produce a version of the Lancer Fiore that would appear in 1985 as the Proton Saga. Mitsubishi would own 30% of the company, with the Malaysian government holding the remaining 70%. As part of the deal, Mitsubishi would exit the Malaysian market to prevent competition. Malaysia's first car, even if it was essentially Japanese, was a point of great pride for the country. Two were driven 2,500 miles across the country to show their durability. Getting a Proton at launch was quite a challenge with just 700 cars available at launch, but production quickly increased thanks to the Malaysian government slapping import duty on imported cars and national fervour for Malaysia's first car. Just 1 year after launch, the Proton Saga held 64% of the under 1600cc domestic car market. Once local sales were satisfied, Proton could venture into exports, initially focused on right-hand drive markets because Malaysian drivers drove on the left. The first market was Bangladesh in 1986, followed by Brunei, Malta, New Zealand and Sri Lanka. Fresh off importing the ultra-cheap Yugo, Malcolm Bricklin looked to import the Saga into the US, but ran into emissions regulations. Proton lost a significant amount of money in the venture. It also angered Mitsubishi Motors, who were trying to crack the US market themselves and felt Proton would undercut their efforts with something almost the same. They fired Proton's existing board and clamped down on future export ambitions. In 1987, the Saga got a larger 1.5 litre engine, an automatic gearbox, a small facelift, plus a hatchback as the Saga Aeroback. A year later, Proton had sold an impressive 100,000 cars. Despite holding back on certain exports, Proton entered the European market, starting in Ireland, then quickly the UK, where it got a warm reception from the press, winning 3 awards at the 1988 British Motor Show, and from the public as well, with Proton exceeding their initial sales targets. Proton's UK office claimed it was the fastest selling make of new car to enter the UK, and by 1984 it was outselling Hyundai and Seat. A small victory, but from small acorns grow big trees. It was even selected by the Humberside Police. Proton adverts promised Japanese technology, Malaysian style, and a significant milestone for Malaysian Proton occurred in 1989 when the Saga went on sale in neighbouring Singapore. An update appeared in 1992, the Saga Iswara. In 1993, Proton launched their second car, the larger Wira, sold as the Persona in some markets. It would again be produced with Mitsubishi, being based on the Lancer and available as both a 4-door saloon and 5-door hatchback. It was followed by a flurry of new models, the Satria small hatchback, also known as the Compact or 300 series, launched in 1994. It was based on the Mitsubishi Mirage, as was the 1996 Putra two-door coupe. The Perdana was even larger than the Wira, in the same size class as the Toyota Camry and based on the Mitsubishi Eterna. But Proton weren't wholly wedded to Mitsubishi. The Tiara in 1996 was a Citroën AX built under license and signalled Proton was starting to look beyond its Japanese partner. And while sales were good in Malaysia thanks to tariffs discouraging exports, Malaysian rival Perodja started up in 1993 producing Daihatsu clones. In the 1970s, Mitsubishi had pinned their hopes of success by partnering with Chrysler. Chrysler had floundered, which limited Mitsubishi's ability to succeed. By pinning their success to Mitsubishi, Proton found themselves in exactly the same problem. Mitsubishi made good cars, but their failure to sell in significant volume on the world stage limited the money that they could pour into new cars. Proton might have a full range of cars and Malaysia's roads might be filled with them, but exports were another story. The initial flurry of excitement in the UK had dissipated. Proton sold almost 200,000 cars worldwide in 1997, but only about 16,000 made their way to Europe, and sales only decreased in the following years. But as you can see, sales at home were buoyant, with the Malaysian economy growing rapidly and cheap financing options to get new drivers into a Proton. For example, at launch there had been a 6-month wait list for the relatively luxurious Perdana. There was talk of removing the tariff training wheels, with the World Trade Organization putting pressure on Malaysia to level the playing field. A new CEO of the still government-controlled Proton was cutting costs to make Protons more competitive, and a mammoth new factory was under construction which would raise production to 500,000 cars per year. Proton felt that they had money to invest and splurged on British car company Lotus. It's hard to see the synergy between a specialist sports car company and a wannabe mass car maker, mostly using parts from other car companies, but there was surely method to this madness. The first fruits of this partnership was the 1998 Satria GTI that was Lotus tuned, producing a not that impressive 0-60 time of 8.5 seconds, but it was a car with much better handling and performance than a regular Proton. Proton's CEO had struck the Citroën deal to move away from a reliance on Mitsubishi, but after his tragic death in a helicopter crash in 1997, Proton returned to their old ways of relying on Mitsubishi, especially after the 1997 Asian financial crisis dashed any hopes of Proton's expansion, at least in the short term. 1998 sales were less than half the previous year, and Proton scrambled to weather the storm. They cut shifts and mothballed workers on that new larger factory. Thankfully, the money earmarked for this project could be diverted to keeping Proton alive, and it was still the best-selling car maker in Malaysia. By 2001, sales in their home market had recovered, but exports remained anemic. It had been 15 years since the Saga launched, and Proton needed to look for success beyond Mitsubishi, who seemed to be lurching from one problem to another. They were limited in which markets to export to, as Mitsubishi didn't want competition from its own cars, so Proton started designing their own cars, or components at least, beginning with their own engine dubbed the Cam Pro. It was meant to be installed in their next car, the Wajah, but it wasn't ready in time. Wajah means stronger steel in Malay, which, if you think about it, is an odd name for a car that's actually made of steel. I mean, of course it's as strong as steel. It's made of steel, it's not made out of blancmange. Despite lacking their new engine, using ones from Mitsubishi and Renault, Proton claimed it was the first Proton-designed car. It certainly had a lot of Proton-designed parts, however, it was later shown to be based on the Mitsubishi Charisma Volvo S40 platform. It was almost the same size as the Perdana, which was still on sale, which must have caused some confusion in the showroom. And like previous cars, it failed to make an impact on the export market. The Juara microvan appeared in 2001, a joint development between Mitsubishi and Proton, which didn't sell well. The Wajah was also used to create the Arena or Jumbak pickup in 2002. That also failed to sell well in Malaysia, but did better abroad. But that wasn't saying much. For example, only 1,800 were sold in the UK, and total Australian Proton sales in 2003 only amounted to 1,320 cars. The original Proton had been updated in 1992 and it got another update in 2003. The Mitsubishi platform was 20 years old at this point, so the 1985 roots were clear despite sprucing up the exterior. It got a new modern interior, but lacked common features that were table stakes on other cars such as airbags. And although the car was nearly 20 years old, quality problems with this and other Proton cars remained unforgivable at this point. Some Malaysians stumped up almost double the price for a foreign import just to get a car that they could rely on. To make matters worse, World Trade Organization rules meant that these tariffs would soon be ending. The mothballed second factory opened in 2003, giving Proton a yearly output of 350,000 cars, but sales were still woefully below this, and exports in 2003 amounted to just 8,000 cars. In the last quarter of 2003, Proton posted a loss. They were mass car makers without mass car volumes, something MG Rover could tell them wasn't a recipe for success. Protectionism meant that they still weren't a lean company, and quality issues meant customers weren't interested in any case. The purchase of Lotus wasn't exactly helping the bank balance either. Proton and Mitsubishi ended their long agreement in 2004, and the same year Proton launched the first car to use their own chassis and engine, the Gen 2. It was produced in partnership with Lotus, but it too would be beset by production delays stemming from the new Campro engine, and with design problems as well. The roof was too low for adults to sit comfortably in the back. Sales were a disappointment. Rather than sort out Proton's production problems, management went on another buying spree, purchasing Italian high-end motorcycle manufacturer MV Agusta for 80 million euros. This turned out to be a disastrous move, and they ended up selling it again a year later for a nominal €1. The Citroën AX clone, the Tiara, had ended production in 2000, but Proton released a successor in 2005, the Savvy. Like the Gen 2, it was designed in-house, although it would use a Renault engine. Reputedly, MG Rover were keen to rebadge it and import it, but they went bankrupt before any of that could happen. The Satria was updated to use the Proton chassis and Campro engine in 2006, but neither car did much to improve Proton's sales, which were the lowest since the Asian financial crisis. And this wasn't a slump in the Malaysian economy, people were just choosing other cars. 5 years before, Proton held 60% of the Malaysian car market. It now had just 23%, now import tariffs had disappeared. Spending money on its own chassis, a necessity now it had cut ties with the Mitsubishi, were costing too much for the volumes that they were selling, resulting in inevitable losses. Proton made plans to forge an alliance with Turkey and Iran to create a so-called Islamic car, something to appeal to the millions of Muslims around the world. It would include a compass to show the direction to Mecca, a box to store the Quran, and a headscarf compartment. The project came to nothing, but Proton would continue producing new cars to replace its Mitsubishi-derived models, all using Proton's chassis and engines. The Persona update arrived in 2007, along with an update to the Saga in 2008. These models were thankfully more popular and helped steady the bank balance sheet somewhat. Proton also struck a deal with Chinese company Youngman to produce the Persona and Gen 2 in China. Proton's cars were still on sale in the UK despite terrible sales, although they did try to drum up interest by sponsoring Norwich City. Maybe they stayed in the UK because of Proton's British connection with Lotus Cars, maybe because they felt that their next car would surely be the export breakthrough that they needed. But the Persona, so popular in Malaysia, only sold 4 cars in Britain in 2008, meaning export operations, at least in the UK, remained a drain on Proton's funds. Proton at this point were producing saloons and hatchbacks, but the world demanded different cars, minivans large and small, SUVs and crossovers. Proton launched the Exora MPV in 2009 using an all-new Proton platform. It was updated in 2010 as the Exora MC, MC standing for minor change. That's maybe not the best marketing move ever, but at least I'll give them points for being honest. The Exora marked a renewed collaboration with Mitsubishi, who would start selling the car in Japan, and in return Proton would sell the 9th generation Mitsubishi Lancer as the Proton Inspirer. Proton even made quality and suspension improvements to the car that received praise from Mitsubishi. While the Inspirer remained on sale, just 2 years later Proton released a car to replace it, the Preve. Although it might seem odd to launch a very similar car just 2 years later, it's likely the Preve was already in development before the Mitsubishi deal that produced the Inspirer, and Proton would likely make more money from the Preve that used the Proton Gen 2 chassis and Campro engine. With the shape created by Italdesign, it had the sort of luxury features found on competitors' cars such as climate control, Bluetooth connectivity, cruise control, and an optional in-car internet connection. It was also the first Proton to get a 5-star rating from the Australian ANCAP safety agency. A hatchback version, the Suprema S, launched a year later. Like previous models, both cars failed to capture many export sales. Proton had tried their hand at motorsports in the past, winning minor rally series in the 1980s and 1990s. They also won the 2002 Production World Rally Championships, but these cars were really essentially Mitsubishis. The new Proton-engineered Satria took the drivers and constructors title of the 2011 Asia Pacific Rally Championship, underlying that Proton engineers had created a good platform, if only they could persuade customers to buy them. Proton had been government controlled since its inception, but in 2012 Proton was purchased by Malaysian conglomerate DRB Hicom. They in turn purchased a smaller engine from Malaysian oil and gas giant Petronas, the E01, with the hope of fitting it into future cars. And despite the 350,000 capacity factories in Malaysia producing only 116,000 cars, in 2014 Proton announced an agreement to build a new factory in Bangladesh. With the Savvy needing replacement, Proton worked with Italdesign and Lotus to produce a concept of what it might look like, the E-Mass concept, in 2010. There was a thought of the regular version being badged as a Proton, with a hot hatch version being sold as a Lotus. It would surface as the Proton Iriz in 2014, but a Lotus version never appeared. The Petronas E01 small engine wasn't ready, so the car got 1.3 litre and 1.6 litre versions of the Campro engine. The luxurious but ageing Perdana, favoured by Malaysian government officials, was replaced with a second generation in 2014, which was a rebadged Honda Accord assembled in Proton's factory in Malaysia. Sales continued to drop, but Proton released 3 new models in 2016. The first was an updated Persona, essentially an extended booted Iriz. Next was a 3rd generation Saga, still one of, if not the most popular car in Proton's range. Finally, Proton launched the Ertiga, a rebranded version of the Suzuki Ertiga 7-seat MPV. Protons were still on sale in countries like the UK despite almost no sales for decades. Proton had intended to make a new push into the British market in 2013 with 4 new models, but it was postponed due to more stringent EU emissions and safety regulations. Proton was losing money and making poor business decisions. Something had to give. The Malaysian government offered Proton a £352 million lifeline, but mandated that Proton must have a tie-up with a foreign car company in the near future. Proton vetted several suitors, and in 2017 it was announced Chinese carmaker Geely, owner of Volvo, had acquired a 49.9% stake. They also purchased a controlling stake in Lotus. That Petronas E01 engine would be mothballed, and elements of it would be used to make the existing Campro engine more efficient. Still a gaping hole in Proton's lineup was the lack of crossovers and SUVs. With access to Geely's platforms, this was quickly rectified with the X70 introduced just a year after Proton was acquired. It was a rebadged Geely Bowyer and initially produced in China. Some changes had to be made. Malaysia can be a tough place for cars with 34-degree heat in standstill city traffic. Plus, Malaysia drives on the left and Geely's cars had never been designed with this in mind. The X70 was followed by the X50 in 2020 and the X90 in 2023, both rebadged Geely models. These have produced a resurgence in Malaysian sales. Proton can finally supply the cars that customers are looking for. And Proton is still aiming for the export market, selling the cars in Brunei, Indonesia, Kenya, Mauritius and South Africa. And in 2019, Proton announced they would build a factory in Pakistan and expand sales there. There's talk of Proton electric vehicles in 2025, presumably rebadged versions of Geely cars. So, was it right for the Malaysian government to invest in a national car in the 1980s? On the face of it, Proton seems a failure. It can't have made much of a profit and had to be protected through much of its life by tariffs on foreign cars. But there is more to Proton than profits and losses. There's a sense of national pride that buoyed a nation and encouraged them that they're on the up and up. There was the skills that thousands of workers acquired and they used in other industries, helping to turn Malaysia into an industrial nation, the original goal of Malaysia's national car project. But it's also clear that Proton was left to limp along for far too long. Like Hyundai, they started making cars from other manufacturers, learning all the time, and then they ventured into making their own cars. Malaysia is just too small a market to sustain the large spend on modern car platforms, and where Hyundai sold vast quantities of cars around the globe, Proton's cars weren't a good enough value to make an impact outside of Malaysia. Proton's largest export market was the UK, and over 27 years they sold less than 150,000 cars. It didn't help Lotus's prospects either, as Proton weren't able to invest significant funds to turn the Norfolk company into a sports car powerhouse like Ferrari, and there was never much synergy between Proton and Lotus. The Proton saga will continue in Malaysia at least, where it's got nostalgia for thousands of drivers whose first car was a Proton. So that's the history of Proton. If you want to see what happened on the other side of the fence, there's a history of Mitsubishi cars on the right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.